Hello everyone, my name is Bridget, and today we're going to be talking about spiritual living and signs that your vibration is high. And when we're talking about this, we're really talking about soulful living, because when you're in connection with your spirit, you're in connection with your soul. And how do we incorporate this into daily life? There's so much pulling our attention. There's so many things that people are saying that we're supposed to do, especially to be spiritual. And it's like, okay, if I have this crystal or if I'm doing this meditation, then I'm spiritual. Let's break it down and go back to the origins, to the basis, the bedrock of spiritual traditions around the world, and the qualities that they incorporated, that they imbued into spiritual life, that then created an aim, a real clarity, a really direction for who you are in every moment, and moving from what you're doing out there to who you are, to who you're being. So that's what we're going to be getting into today, to clarify where your consciousness is at, how to assist it, particularly surrounding the idea of virtue and how that can complement your spiritual life. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell button so you get notifications every time I do new videos. And my 2024 retreat schedule is now out, as well as my online program Immersion for feminine initiation for all the women out there. I have Sedona Women's Retreat coming up in April, and then I'm venturing to Europe again for another retreat in Glastonbury and Ireland this year. So be sure to go check out the links below and let's engage in person. That's part of spiritual living, is doing this in the day-to-day with like-hearted, like-minded people. And I'm here to facilitate and assist, and I would love to meet you. So be sure to go check those out down below. All right, so let's get into it. So the first place to begin is there's this conversation going around on the New Age spiritual online conversation, which is probably why you clicked on this video as well, that talks about once you've had your awakening, the key is now to raise your vibration and follow your excitement and find your purpose. And this is what I've talked about for a long time as well, and so many people are talking about. And often that can become extraordinarily broad and ambiguous, where our ego and like shadow and confusion of all these poles in the world can take us down paths that aren't actually like kind or good to ourselves and to each other, where it can become a bit bypassy or self-indulgent, where it's like, I'm being high vibe. And in your head, maybe that person is, but their behaviors don't match it, right? They're like, I'm spiritual, but then I go cheat on my boyfriend. So there's these mismatches in identity and behavior. And where we want to start is that matching of word and action. And to even know how to have alignment with our word and alignment with our action and behaviors, we first have to start on our values and who we are as a person and who we choose to be as a soul. And going back to the core root of who we are, not based on what anyone's saying, what it needs to look like to be spiritual or high vibe, but to actually find that place within us, within our own hearts, is where we need to begin. So this is a short conversation right here, and I've done a whole hour-long podcast that really goes deep into this conversation. So if you want to check that long conversation out, because there's so much nuance to this, be sure to go check it out on my Wild and Awake podcast. The link's down below. So for this abbreviated version, to get the gist, to start feeling into this, we're wanting to connect in with our soul. And one of the great first frameworks that we can look at was the map of consciousness created by Dr. Hawkins. And you can see that here. And I have a whole other video going deep into it, but just to start a framework of like, I don't even know like where my vibration's at. And we can start gauging by our states if they're a lower state of consciousness or a higher state of consciousness. And that thing that bridges us from those lower states of fear, of shame, whatever those energies are, anger, resentment, all those vibes, we can use courage to move us into that higher state. And vulnerability also moves us into these higher states of love, of joy. And oftentimes there's a break in these things where it's like, I'm wanting to feel love and joy and acceptance, but I'm pissed and I'm angry at this person. And so how do we bridge that gap? And what has been really helpful for me recently is the idea of virtue and incorporating virtue into our lives. So when we look at the definition, we see that virtue in the Western dictionary is a behavior showing a high moral standard. So it's connected with morality, and morality starts to go into good and bad and right and wrong. And some of the fear and guilt and shame that is the shadow side of Christian religion. And so we start to throw those things out, like baby out with the bathwater, where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to like play in that realm because it just doesn't feel good because it has all this lower energy stuff attached to it. But taking a look into the Eastern approach, the Eastern definition of virtue, it's more of a quality, an inherent energy, an inherent essence that one carries as a way of being. It's something that you emanate in who you are. And often that's aligned with your values, and then you behave in accordance. But it's coming from this deeper soul yearning than just like, I'm scared to go to hell. It's like, no, this is who I am and what I stand for. And so this does come back into a level of morality where it's like, who are you as a person? Is integrity important to you? What are these qualities that are significant? So I want to take us into some of the ideas of like what virtues are. Like what are some of the virtues so that you can start to choose which ones that you want to begin cultivating, the ones that you want to begin practicing in your day-to-day life. So when you're faced with a situation in your day-to-day life of how you want to show up, you can use these virtues and what you're wanting to become as a person, as a soul, to gauge this. And in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about this as Buddhist merit. And it's how we live, it's how we serve. And it also has repercussions, say, karmically, and how our soul develops in this life. And this cultivation is something that you can begin doing right now, and it's something that's already started for you. So they're inherent qualities that you came in with in this life. They're things that are passed on generationally, which can be seen as ancestral treasures. So some people are born with certain treasures in their family with, wow, they're really courageous, or they have high integrity, or there's a real kindness and gentleness in that quality of that person and of that family. So we come in with these treasures and they start to form with whoever our family is, and in the womb with our mom, with whatever virtues and qualities that she had are then imbued into our organs, which is talked about in Chinese medicine and Taoist practices. And that's how I was first introduced to virtue. And I'll go over those in just a second, so that when we're checking in with ourselves and we're saying, where is my vibration at? Am I spiritually living aligned with myself? We can check in and see if we're in alignment with the virtues that we consciously were using in our mind to incorporate, to focus on our aim of what we want to become and what we want to develop in ourselves. So I want to share a couple more traditions before we close up here of where virtues are incorporated. And for instance, Rudolf Steiner in Rosicrucianism, virtue was a huge part of his work, and he talked about it as a progression of the soul, not like an achievement, like a badge of honor of like, okay, now I have more courage, or now I have more kindness, or now I have more honor. But he talked about as a progression, like something that we're working on in ourselves in the day-to-day. And the virtues he talked about, because there are dozens, there are hundreds of different qualities that we can develop, and this starts to direct our aim. So some that he talked about is devotion, perseverance, compassion, patience, courage, these qualities. And so we can see that in the Western Rosicrucian tradition. We also see it when we look at the 7 deadly sins and the 7 heavenly virtues. So in our daily life right now, and a lot, say like on social media, we see a lot of these 7 deadly sins, or the anti-virtue, the opposite, which would be a lower vibration. And so we see greed and pride and envy or jealousy and lust and all these kinds of things, especially like on social media and in the world today. And so then we can go, okay, well, who do I want to be? What are my values? What do I want to cultivate in this spiritual living to raise my vibration? And we can look at the 7 heavenly virtues: humility, charity, modesty, gratitude, patience, temperance, these really rich strengths. And that's what they talk about when we talk about the definitions too, that these qualities that you develop start to become actual power. But it's a power that's coming from benevolence, which is incredibly strong and strengthening. Even when we talk about like muscle testing and we see if it's in alignment, in resonance, you actually become physically strong. So when we're developing these certain soul qualities, we actually get strength in all aspects of our consciousness and all aspects of our even body and emotional body. And so there's lots of different ways of cultivating, and even just becoming attuned to these ideas is really helpful. One of the things that has helped me is, for instance, amazing living old growth tea. And some teas have actual virtues to them, or there's certain people, there's certain places that carry these virtues. So allowing yourself to steep in these energies of goodness, where oftentimes we just sit in binge areas and ingest negative anti-virtues. It's like, how do we steep in these higher qualities to begin developing them? And often when we have virtues, we're not even aware of them. So start paying attention to maybe your friends and family and the qualities that are beautiful and benevolent that they don't even know that they have. Or maybe there's ones you're aware of that you have that you've worked on and developed. Like courage is a real big one that I've focused on in this life. I've needed a lot of courage, and courage has brought me so many beautiful things in my life. I wouldn't have the amazing partnership I have right now if I didn't have the courage to say how I felt, for instance. And it's brought me a lot of ways of aligning more with who I am. So another way that you can cultivate, and that I did, starting out on my virtue journey, is through Qigong and Eastern practices, and actually just sitting in reflection and meditation. But to go back to in Qigong, and when we're in our mother's womb and these virtues are being developed in us, we can develop them in this lifetime and they carry on with us. So some of the examples of those are the heart, the actual organ of the heart, which carries the virtue of joy, and the opposite of that is hatred. Kindness in the liver, the opposite of anger. Trust in the spleen, the opposite is mistrust. Gentleness in the kidneys versus fear. So how can we direct our aim, direct our attention, direct our day-to-day living, our beingness with these qualities, with these virtues? So choose a couple of them to begin focusing on and to begin living from. So daily life hands us opportunities all the time to behave in a new way, to act in a new way, to be in a new way. So how do you show up? And you can begin letting these beautiful, benevolent, almost like celestial guides be your director as your soul and your values guide you in life to raise your vibration and live more soulfully. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. This kind of feels like short, even though it might be long on YouTube. So if you want the longer version, go check out the podcast. And again, be sure to go check out my retreats and my online feminine initiation program that starts this spring down below, to connect and work with me more in person, and to go to places and be with people that hold these qualities and begin to develop them and feel them in your everyday life. So thanks so much for being here. Be sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.